The entertaining Talking Sports.
What is going on, football? That's bad attitude. No.
Great job by Giselle with my intro. I didn't have to do it for you guys tonight. That was sent to me by Giselle and Geomon on Instagram. So I want to say thank you for that, and I really got a kick out of that. So I wanted to show that for you guys. But in tonight's video, there wasn't a lot of news today, so I figured I've been thinking about doing this for a while. I think it's fun to try to project what the New York Giants are going to do in free agency, being that now it's only about a week away, and everybody's anxious. We've heard a lot of rumors. We've heard guys like Jadaveon Clowney linked to the Giants. We've heard guys like Byron Jones. We've heard guys like Kyle Van Noy. And I'm going to go over a couple of various scenarios and what I think is the most likely outcome come free agency day and who I think could end up with the New York Giants. And maybe it won't be these exact players, but I think it's how the money will be distributed if I had to guess. And I'll break down the length of the contract for each individual player. Another thing that we've heard consistently throughout this entire offseason is that the New York Giants seemingly plan to spend a good deal of their money in free agency on the defensive side of the football. Now, of course, there's guys like Jack Conklin, there's guys like Bulaga, but this is my prediction. This is what I think is going to happen. I did have one scenario where we brought in Conklin. I really don't see us bringing in a guy like a Bulaga because we're old on the line as is. If we're going to bring in a supreme offensive lineman, a guy that you're paying a good deal of money, I would like it to be a younger guy like Conklin. But at the end of the day, I don't really see that playing out. I think, if you ask me today, we're going to spend a lot of our money on free agency on defense to try to set us up to take a young tackle early in the draft. I could be completely wrong. We still may go with Isaiah Simmons. But let's jump into it. Let's go with my prediction of what I think the New York Giants will do in free agency. Now, I did a video on Van Noy yesterday, and I did a bunch of scenarios, but a lot of them are going to include Van Noy. All of them are going to include Leonard Williams, and all of them are going to include team depth of $5 million. I've broken down the salary cap numerous times for the New York Giants. They're going to have about $80 million to spend at the end of the day. I think they got 73 now, but I expect Ellison to retire. I expect a couple other little things. We're going to say about $80 million to spend, but like Gettleman has said from the start, we're going to set aside $20 million for in-season moves and the draft. The draft alone is going to cost you $12 to $13 million, and you want at least $7 or $8 million in season to be able to make trades if you want to bring in a player or two. So this is the scenario that I have. Team depth, I set aside $5 million to retain players on the current roster or even bring in a backup quarterback, something like that. So it could be 5 to 7, but I gave us a little more flexibility with 5. A guy like Chase Daniels, someone like that, Glennon, whoever it may be. And keeping guys like Cody Core, Mayo on the roster, that's $5 million. I then set $13 million for Leonard Williams. I still think that's going to be the going rate, whether it's the transition tag or whether that's his per-year average. And I do think he will be back with the New York Giants. I could be wrong, but I think that's where everything points. Dave Gettleman, of course, acquired him. I think he's going to want to keep him. He also fits what I think our new head coach is going to want to do. I have Van Noy in a variety of scenarios that we're going to start with. Then I'll have a scenario without Van Noy. But I think of all the free agents that I've heard, I think Van Noy is the most logical and reasonable free agent that they will bring in. And if I had to guess today, I would say Van Noy will be a New York Giant. So of the $60 million, right out of the gate in this scenario, I'm going to give you 3 different scenarios, but all 3 of these pieces will be in all 3 of them. That's 30 of the $60 million. And then I will break down how the money could be distributed otherwise on other players. This is the first option that I laid out. I had Cory Littleton for $14 to $16 million. Now, of course, Cory Littleton, much like Jack Conklin, is going to be very sought after. He's a guy that I love. He's a guy that I've said that I've expressed that I'd be willing to give a 4 or possibly 5-year contract. I like his age. I like his ability to cover. He's the type of player that I think the New York Giants have longed for. Their fans have wanted for quite some time. And he'd fill a void. You would not have to draft a guy like Isaiah Simmons. Of course, they still could. But if they were to do this, I think you're definitely looking at an early offensive tackle. We could still trade down, accumulate more assets, and bring in a tackle that way. But you're filling in your linebacker here. You're filling in your edge rusher to replace Marcus Golden with Van Noy, who's a little more versatile, good in coverage, things like that. And you're bringing in a veteran corner in the fourth piece of this with a guy like Logan Ryan, Chris Harris Jr., or Trey Waynes between $10 to $12 million. So you're getting a supreme linebacker, the best linebacker in this year's class, a solid defense outside linebacker with Van Noy and that veteran corner. Chris Harris Jr., probably around 11 to 12 from what I've read. He's more of a slot guy, but he's a guy that's versatile that could do both. He's played both throughout his career. Trey Wayne, same thing. He's a veteran corner, and Logan Ryan, known more to be a slot guy. Maybe he gets a little bit more, but that's what I got, $10 to $12 million for that depth corner in this scenario. The next scenario I'm going to play out for you guys is this one, and this is with getting Jack Conklin. Jack Conklin costs you between $18 to $20 million, and I know that sounds crazy, but that's what he's going to go for. I really believe that. I know he's a right tackle as opposed to a left. Nate Solder got $19 million with the New York Giants, but because of his age and because of the market, and I think there's been a bigger emphasis on the right tackle and how much in demand he's going to be with 6 or 7 teams, I think Conklin's going to get close to $20 million. I think that's what it'll cost. That's up for you to decide whether you think he's worth it. By bringing him in, it does set up the ability to be very flexible in the first round of the draft, and obviously you address what is arguably the Giants' biggest need, which is help on that offensive line, and you're bringing in a young player, albeit with an injury history. But I think that's what Conklin would cost. Now, in this scenario, it's only going to leave you with about $10 million after you bring in Conklin, if we were to keep Leonard Williams and Van Noy, which I think we're going to. And then I brought in another depth player at a position, either Joe Schobert or Blake Martinez as a mid-tier middle linebacker, or a value cornerback like Prince Amukamara or maybe Trey Waynes, who of those 3 cornerbacks I listed earlier, I thought, was probably the guy that maybe could fall into the $8 to $10 million range. So I think this is another option if you were to bring in Conklin. Now, you don't get that supreme linebacker, Cory Littleton. Instead, you spend it on Conklin, and you get, and you get a depth player there at either the linebacker position or the cornerback spot. And I do think, in my opinion at least, it's important to bring in a veteran corner. And then finally, the final option, which is very possible, is we end up with the first 3, and then we spend, the extra $30 million or so on retaining Marcus Golden, who is that edge rusher that got us 10 sacks last year. You couple him with Van Noy for the same price it would be for a Jadaveon Clowney, and then you bring in that top-tier cornerback who's still young with Byron Jones, who's projected to make $16 to $18 million. I think all 3 of these scenarios are possible. It's going to depend on where the New York Giants want to spend the bulk of their money, but I could see all 3 of them playing out. Now, the next set is going to be what I call the Hog Wild scenario, where the New York Giants really try to make a splash in free agency by bringing in some players. Now, this is the semi-Hog Wild, and then I have 2 Hog Wild scenarios. Again, team depth, Leonard Williams, $18 million. Now, instead of Van Noy, I had them getting Clowney for an additional $10 million at $22 million, which is a combination of $40 million spent already, leaving you with about $20 million. And with that $20 million, you have a couple of options. This is option A, where you spread it out between 2 players. You bring in a mid-tier linebacker like Joe Schobert or Blake Martinez, and Trey Waynes or Prince Amukamara for that other cornerback spot, that veteran corner, to go along with Jadaveon Clowney. Clowney, of course, is going to be a 5-year deal as opposed to Van Noy, who would be a 3. The other option you have, if you go with Clowney, would be the Hog Wild. You spend a 5-year contract on Clowney, you spend a 5-year contract on Byron Jones, and potentially a 4 or 5-year contract on Leonard Williams if you don't transition tag him. But you get your number 1 corner, you get your guy that's thought to be one of the best edge rushers in this year's free agency class, or instead of Byron Jones, you get Cory Littleton. You get your linebacker with Jadaveon Clowney. Now, one guy that I failed to mention in this entire scenario was McCourty. You could certainly add him in instead of one of those $8 to $10 million cornerbacks if you want to go that route and shift Love over to the slot cornerback. That's definitely a possibility as well. I suppose Conklin and Clowney's possible, but I'm not banking on that. I don't think the Giants end up with both those players because at the end of the day, we all got to realize that all these teams are going to be trying to get these players. But the Hog Wild method, I think you end up with Clowney and a guy like a Littleton or Byron Jones. I don't see the New York Giants going this route. They've expressed that they want to be cost-effective, and they don't want to go Hog Wild. So I would say the first set of scenarios with Van Noy is probably the more likely of the 2. And, of course, if you guys want to take a look back at that, you could pause the video and look at all the 3 different scenarios. But if I had to guess, that is the way I see the money being distributed. I don't think we get Clowney. We could. We're definitely seemingly interested from everything you're reading. But you're also reading that is probably out of the New York Giants price range, the $22 to $23 million. We'll have to wait and see. But I think we go with option A, somewhere in that range where we get Van Noy. I'll show it to you guys one more time, where we get Van Noy and something like this, Marcus Golden and a Byron Jones, or the first scenario that I went over, which I think is probably the most likely of all of them, is Cory Littleton and a depth corner, something like that. I think that's what you're looking at. I'm hoping for one big piece, whether it be Cory Littleton or whether it be a Byron Jones. I personally don't really want Byron Jones. I think he's way over the line. But like I said, Littleton's going to be very sought after. But that's how I see free agency playing out. We'll have to wait and see. Obviously, the New York Giants there's going to be a lot of competition for all of these players. But I just wanted to give my 2 cents on how I predict it to play out and who I think could end up with the New York Giants in just about a week. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.